all of us need to hear from people that we trust the truth, ideas about how to handle the truth, and ideas about what to do on the basis of those difficult truths. People want to know, they want to be prepared, they want to get into a position of being able to do something about it.
Now then, do you want to know what's going on? Are you ready to hear how bad stuff really is? I don't mean in a David Icke conspiratorial everything is run by lizards kind of way. I mean about climate change. Are you ready to hear that? That is a really interesting question. It's what we're going to look at in this episode of Your Brain on Climate. Stuff is bad, and we're going to talk a little bit about this in this episode. But what we're mostly talking about is being honest, or whether we can be, or whether we should be, about how bad stuff is and what that implies. Do each of us have a responsibility to understand, to face how bad it is, to internalize it, to deal with it, and to tell others? Or are there times when that's just not the best idea? Do our brains like a bit of fantasy? Can we bear knowing how nosed stuff is? Big questions, big stuff, fascinating chat. Strap yourself in. This month on Your Brain on Climate, I am talking to the wonderful Rupert Read, Associate Professor of Philosophy at the University of East Anglia. But more than that, he's a green activist. He's been hugely influential in Extinction Rebellion. He's now got a new campaign project starting up called the Climate Majority Project. Launches properly on the 29th of June this year. We talk about it in here. He's written books, including a new book, all about honesty and about the importance of it for him and how he finds it not a thing that bums people out, but a thing that unbums people, that liberates you. That's what he says. And Rupert is on a mission to get people to tell their truths about climate change. So that's what we're going to talk about here. As always, if you hear this noise, it signifies wisdom. That wisdom will have come from Rupert and probably not from me. There'll be a little link in the show notes explaining a bit more about that wisdom so you can carry on, and then when you're finished, do some homework. A massive thank you to people who sponsor the show on Patreon. That enables me to pay my guests. That is good, that is important, and it enables me to keep this show on the road because I do it mostly for love. You can join them, wobblywobblywobbly.patreon.com/yourbrainonclimate. A couple of quid a month if you like what I'm doing means more of this sort of thing. Support independent podcasting. There is no massive Spotify or Acast or any of them gits behind this. It's just me. Right, on with it. This is my chat with Rupert. It does get a little bit grim at times, but it isn't one of them everything is buggered and we're all doomed talks. It really, really isn't. I actually come out the other end of this feeling incredibly cheered and inspired, and I hope that you do too, even though there are some hard truths in the middle of it.
Your brain on climate.
So Rupert, hello, how you doing?
Hi. Yes, all right. Thanks, Dave.
Very good, very good. Very warm day out there. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, I love a good summer heat wave. What I'm not particularly looking forward to is a sort of endless infernal summer, which we may be on the brink of. I have this little catchphrase that in Game of Thrones, which some listeners will be aware of, there's this great catchphrase, winter is coming. So what I say is summer is coming. And everyone's like, well, that sounds good, right? We like summer. And yeah, but not this kind of summer, not 40 degrees, for example, as it was last year. And, well, that was just the beginning, because now we've got El Niño coming, and we're probably going to have record high temperatures ever across the globe. And what we are likely to have also is the breaking of the epochal 1.5 degree barrier, the safety guardrail for global overheat. And that's probably going to be breached for the first time during this El Niño period of the next few years. So, yeah, one always has slightly mixed feelings now when there's a warm day.
It doesn't sound like your feelings are that mixed. Now, listen, you've gone straight in the deep end. That was my fault. And we're going to rein this back. We're going to come to
Fair enough.
the imminent heat death of everything. Don't worry, we will talk about that. But this
No,
is...
it's not going to be the heat death of everything if I've got anything to do with it.
Good
but
chat.
Anyway, yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, great. Well, no, exactly. Right, good. So, look, this is... Now, listeners, this is not going to be... We're not going to let it be one of those chats that makes you end it by wanting to sling yourself off a bridge. That is not what we're doing here, right? So Rupert is going to talk about stuff like that, because that's the sort of stuff Rupert talks about. But he also talks about hope and how to find it, active hope, and how you can actually navigate some of this stuff. And one of the ways that you talk about that, Rupert, is through honesty. And before we dig into what it is, would you say you find it easy to be honest, just on a kind of day-to-day level? Like if someone annoys you in the street, do you tend to call them a bastard?
Well, all right. So here's the thing about honesty, right? It's not the same as just spilling your guts out. So I would think twice before calling someone I don't know in the street a bastard if they're nasty to me, because among other things, I'd be worried about what this person was capable of. But yeah, to answer your question in a serious but also personal way, I think I do, to be honest, find it slightly easier to be honest than quite a lot of people do. I've always put a very high store on honesty. One of the things that attracted me, for example, to the Quakers in the sort of spiritual part of my life is that they believe passionately in honesty and truth-telling and so forth, and always have done. And I thought, that's great. That vibes with me. That fits with me. The way I see it is life's too short not to be honest most of the time with most of the people. And so often, as the saying goes, honesty really is the best policy in terms of long run good results as well. So those are some of the sort of starting points for, we'll get deeper into it, but for why, yeah, I do think that honesty is really important across life. And I really do try to practice it.
So not necessarily if you're going to get your head caved in by a large person in the street.
That's right.
But in your relationships, in your work relationships, personal relationships, if a thing needs saying, you were on the side of saying it.
Yeah, absolutely. In very personal relationships, I strongly believe in having friends and loved ones who one can actually be oneself with. Otherwise, again, what is the point? So yeah, and it's a way of countering the tendency which some people have, unfortunately, in our contemporary culture, to put a very high value on appearances rather than reality as well.
And I guess the flip side, are you good at receiving honesty? So if someone in your personal life tells you something that was difficult for you to hear, you all right with that?
Well, like the rest of us, I'm sure, I find it difficult often at first when something like that happens. And this has been part of my psychological journey and my spiritual journey of starting to find it a bit easier and becoming a bit less thin-skinned. For example, being on Twitter, actually, and having quite a lot of followers as I do now, has helped in that regard, because for quite a long time, I took things really personally on Twitter if people criticized me and so forth. And now it's really interesting. When the trolls come for me, mostly I am entirely unmoved. There's not even a flicker, and I take that to be real progress. Now, I don't know if they're being honest or not, but what I'm getting at is that yes, I think I am in a better position now to be able to take all sorts of criticism or whatever, whether it's fair or otherwise. And if a criticism comes from someone and it's what they honestly think, then I do find that there's something more satisfying about that than if they're just, trying to get a rise out of me or being nasty for the sake of it or something, right? I would like to hear. So, if any of my trolls are listening, I would like to hear what you really think. Don't try and get a rise out of me, because you just can't anymore. But I am interested in engaging with people about what they honestly think, believe, feel.
Your name will also go on the list. What is it? Don't tell him, Pike. Pike.
Yeah, and I suppose honesty does not have to equal rudeness, does it? And this is something you said a minute ago. There's a lot of people there's a lot of stuff I've come across in my life that is this kind of what people call radical honesty. And there's a sort of workplace thing of practicing this a while ago, where there's a culture of like, I'll tell you absolutely what I think, and if you don't like it, tough. But there is a way of being honest with people that doesn't just trample on their feelings, right?
My God, yes. So let me give a completely opposite kind of example, Dave. I think people should be much more honest about their care and their love for each other. There's still, even in Britain today, quite a lot of stiff upper lipness going around, and I think we could use a lot less of it. So one of my regrets in life is I had a very, very close friend. He was probably my best friend, although I wasn't entirely clear about that at the time. He was quite a bit younger than me, and he died tragically in an accident at sea. He was lost at sea. His body was never found. And after it died, a few weeks later, I came to realize, I never really told him that I loved him. I never really said to him, I love you, because I think males in our society just don't do that terribly often. Or if they do it, they often do it in a sort of slightly jocular kind of way. Oh, I love you, mate, and give them the slap on the back or something. And there's that's great. But there's something perhaps even greater about if you really say it to someone in a way such that they know it's completely sincere and that you're good with it and so on. So, honesty is by no means about saying to people hard things. It's also about saying to people beautiful things and deep things that perhaps too often we keep to ourselves.
I'm moved. I'm sorry about your friend.
Yeah, I'm feeling it again now.
Yeah. I wonder how much honesty, psychologically, how much honesty we can bear about stuff. And let's get into this a bit now. Because do you think we need elements of fantasy, big fantasies like kind of how the world works, and little fantasies just to just kind of get through the day in some sense? Because if you were honest about absolutely everything and the fact that we are meaningless specks of dust in a universe that doesn't care about us and everything that lives will die, I don't know if I'd get through the day really. So is honesty always what we need?
Well, gosh, Dave, there's a lot there. Everything that lives will die. And I think we should be completely honest about that. That's one of the great lessons of all great spiritual and philosophical teachings, from the Buddha to Heidegger. I think if we live our lives in that knowledge, it actually enriches them. You also said meaningless specks of dust. Well, I don't accept that we are meaningless. I think that there is meaning in life, and I think we can give it even more meaning. And in fact, that's one of the things which I think is really hopeful about this desperate moment in human history, that there is tremendous purpose and meaning available to people in the darkness of this time, a bit like there was in the Second World War, where it's fascinating to note that although people were horribly up against it, suicide rates fell, for example. Why is that? Arguably the reason is that people had more to live for, and they found purpose in life, and they found meaning together. And what the situation we're in now is a bit like that, certainly in relation to climate and ecology. So, I wouldn't go along with that either. Now, in terms of the concept of fantasy, well, look, we all sometimes need a bit of escapism. So one of the things that I've done for the last few years, which caused my friend and colleague Jem Bendel to laugh out loud when I told him that in the middle of a live podcast, is that I watch the entire series, the entire 10 series of Friends with my wife. And I find that a good wind down at the end of the day. I have found it sometimes when I've been suffering from eco-anxiety in recent years that it has been helpful as a kind of escape. So we all need a bit of escape. But I actually think that we practice too much escape on balance, that too many people spend too much of their lives deliberately trying to escape from reality. And of course, the fascinating thing, and I've written a lot about this, about great fantasy writing and great science fiction and many great novels and myths. I mean, myth is really the relevant category here, is that at the end of the day, they're not really escape. And in a certain sense, they're not even really fantasy. So something like Lord of the Rings or Avatar, for example, they're really about us in the most deep way possible. And they're about the historical moment that we're in many important ways. So I actually think that the best kind of fantasy is one which re-engages us more deeply with reality, and that actually takes us back to what it is to honestly face up to reality. And sometimes we do that by way of what people call escapism, but it really isn't when it's done well.
Right, so, okay, let's get honest. Let's get honest about the state of the planet. Now, we're not going to do this for very long because you'll bum people out. And you're not allowed to bum people out unless you unbum them again. But what is it that we have to be honest about when it comes to climate change? What are we not honest about?
So let me start off by saying that what I'm all about is unbumming people. But the way that...
I want that on your CV immediately.
Yeah. The way that gets done when it's done properly is not by simply distracting people or enabling them to just put on a happy face. It's precisely by going through the difficult stuff. And this has been at the core of the books that I've written in recent years, especially my most recent books, Why Climate Breakdown Matters and Do You Want to Know the Truth, which of course has the subtitle, The Surprising Rewards of Climate Honesty. And what's surprising is that when we really go through the hard stuff, and when we go through it in the right spirit, and we go through it together, and when we go through it and stop shying away from it and stop trying to keep it at arm's length, then we can unbum ourselves together, and we can stop everything from just feeling so kind of grim and difficult and so forth. So that is the essence of what, as you know, Dave, I passionately believe, that the way to get to a place where we're actually okay again is to admit the very, very difficult feelings which will arise when you actually allow yourselves, as most of us, and I don't exclude myself here, most of the time don't do, when you actually allow yourselves to face up to climate reality. And the reality is very difficult. So a few little headlines, as we started off by saying, the politicians in 2015 told us, look, we're going to do our level best to keep temperatures globally to below 1.5 degrees, to below rising 1.5 degrees average from where they were pre-industrially, which of course may not sound a lot, but that's an average, and it's much higher in crucial areas like Antarctica and the Arctic, and for that matter, Europe. It's much higher over land than it is over the sea. And we've already seen in recent years the horrendous perturbations that can be brought about by just that level of heating, because we're now approaching 1.5 degrees. We're probably going to exceed it for the first time in this El Niño period, which means the next couple of years. If you don't know what El Niño is, don't worry, you soon will. It's the disturbance of the weather system, which is going to be producing all sorts of horrendous results, including this heating, in the next couple of years. So the situation is very tough, and it's going to get worse for a long time to come. That is one of the things that we don't want to hear, but need to hear. And when we work through it together, we can find a way to make it okay. But until we actually face it, it's just going to carry on getting worse. The situation is going to get worse for quite a long time to come. And until we face that, it's going to carry on getting worse, because that would mean that we're not prepared to turn and face it and to do what is necessary to stop it from getting worse.
Yeah, and there's, I guess, if not a lie, then there's a thing that we tell ourselves buried in that, which is that at some point in the future, this will be bad unless we act, right? That's one of the stories that is kind of told by climate communications. Do something and we can stop it being bad. But stuff that comes out of your work is, no, it's going to be bad anyway. Like, even if we stopped everything now, this is in the post, this is coming, and we need to be honest about that, right?
Absolutely right. But also, Dave, that it is already bad, that it is already incredibly bad for many people in the global south, that it's incredibly bad for people who are losing their homes and their livelihoods, whose places of home and work are being washed away as we speak, that it's incredibly bad for those who have been affected already and killed. I mean, what could be worse than that? By the climate disasters that we've already had, by the unprecedented floods in Germany, by these appalling wildfires in North America, absolutely shocking pictures we're getting now from New York, and so forth. It's two things that are connected. It is going to get worse for quite a while to come, and we need to come to terms with that. And it is already very bad. And if we miss that it's already very bad, for example, we're going to miss how crucial it is to adapt to what is here right now already. As long as people say things like, well, this is all about 2050 and it's all about mitigating and preventing future harm, that distracts us from the harm that is here and that is imminent. And we need to adapt and prepare and make ourselves more resilient now. We need to be prepared in this country, for example, for more summers like last summer. We need to be prepared for wildfires, which we got a taste of at the height of it last summer. But I think that one thing that is very likely is that sometime in the next few years, and it might literally be this year or next year, we're going to get some really serious wildfires in this country because we are horrendously unprepared for wildfires. This is just an example, but it's a very pertinent one because of what we've seen recently in Northern America. If we do get horrendous wildfires in this country, we will be very poorly prepared for them. So let's prepare. But we don't prepare as long as we keep thinking, this is a problem for the grandchildren, or this is something for politicians with long-term spectacles to look at. No, it's here. It's really bad already. It's going to get worse for quite a long time to come. Let's get real about it. Let's roll our sleeves up. And if this is difficult to take, and it is, let's look at that and work on that together.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? This is difficult to take. And one of the things that you've written about, and I think it's right at the heart of the problem here, is we are told this is an emergency. There's an emergency going on. Everybody act as if there's an emergency, but we don't. And it's not because we kind of don't necessarily think this is a crisis, but we just don't kind of act like it, right? And you say you call that a meta-emergency. So this idea that like the emergency is we're not behaving as if it's an emergency.
Yeah.
Right? So how do we smash that then?
Well, it's hard, right? It's hard. As you've discussed in some detail in some previous episodes, Dave, there is some reason to believe that the human brain is not very well wired to deal with these kinds of phenomena, i.e. something that is very diffuse, very, very slow acting, hard to pin down responsibility for, difficult to identify clear enemies and to differentiate oneself from them. There's all sorts of ways in which climate is a really tough nut, psychologically and psychosocially to crack. So we should give ourselves a bit of a break on that front, but not too much of a break, because we've got to do something about this. We've got to find workarounds. So one workaround is to notice and to bring home how it is here and it is now. And that's another reason why I emphasize in my work the importance of focusing on adaptation and not just mitigation. So mitigation is the term that climate people use for reducing climate dangerous emissions. And most of the time, that's all we hear about in relation to climate. But adaptation is about, well, how do we deal with the damage that is here and the worst damage that is coming? And what I say is, if we start to focus, if we start to really focus and really put money into and effort into and so forth, adaptation, transformative adaptation of the right kind, one of the great virtues that will have, as well as helping us to prepare and be ready to deal with the shit that is coming and the worst shit that is coming after that, one of the great additional advantages will be that it will help to wake us up and other people. Yeah, because when people see other people talking and doing adaptation, they're like, oh my God, so it's here, it's real. It's not something for our grandchildren. It's not about 2100 or 2050. So actually, the interesting and helpful irony is that it's quite possible that the best thing we could do now to serve the cause of mitigating and preventing future climate harm by way of reducing emissions is to actually focus more on adaptation and less on mitigation. We can bring the full gravity of the situation home to people, if we show through our actions that it's not about the future, that it's here, This is the great psychological significance of adaptation now.
Your brain on climate.
So if you don't mind me asking, you mentioned in passing earlier on that you struggle sometimes with eco-anxiety, and you get round that by watching box sets of 90s comedy. And I want to ask about that anxiety a bit, because it seems to me it's a consequence of knowing what's going on. So the honesty that you about the state of things that you have internalized makes you feel quite anxious. You have coping mechanisms, and clearly you are able to carry on. But what if people can't? What if there are some people who don't have your resilience and your toolkit and can't cope with the implications of honesty? Does that change the strategy? Does it change who we should be honest with?
Yeah, really interesting, but again, very complex question. So let me just say something about myself first, because you've brought that up. So I am tending to suffer from eco-anxiety less and less. And that's interesting because the situation continues to deteriorate. Why is that happening for me? It's because I've found it easier and easier, actually, as time has gone on, to reconcile myself to the reality of the situation that we're in. I mean, in a psycho-spiritual kind of way. And that comes a lot from doing collective practices with other people, obviously, who are in a similar kind of position. So first thing is, it's not the case, as some people who are a bit less intimate with this stuff might think, it's not the case that the more you get into this, the harder it becomes emotionally. Actually, my experience is the opposite, that the more I've got into it, on balance, the easier it has become. Now, there are a lot of people who are really struggling a lot more than I do now with eco-anxiety, especially, we know, many, many young people. And I teach some of them, and I meet some of them at meetings and in social media and so forth. And yeah, look, we're all going to have our coping mechanisms. But what I'm about is the biggest, if you will, coping mechanism of them all, in a good way, which is us processing this together and finding on-ramps into doing stuff about it, which is enormously therapeutic. Right? This is one of the secrets of success of movements like Extinction Rebellion, that a lot of people who participated found that the actual act of participation itself significantly improved their mental health and their ability to cope with the situation. Now, what I passionately believe, Dave, and what the professional audience research that the organization I run has done also shows, is that there are a lot of people out there who are worried when they get together with other people who are also feeling similarly to them. They find it helpful. When they are given a realistic appraisal of the situation, they find that welcome, because they are no longer having to invent worst-case scenarios. They can actually just face what the situation actually is, which is bad, but not as grim as it's sometimes painted as being on Twitter or especially TikTok. And it's not beyond redemption, and there's always plenty that we can do. And that's really, really important to always stay in touch with. So what our attitude is, and what my attitude is actually to have faith in people. And what we believe is that the elites who think that the truth on climate is too good for ordinary people, and they are inclined to keep the truth about how bad things are to themselves. And there's quite a number of such people. I know them. Some of them are friends of mine, in NGOs, in academia, in campaigning organizations, etc. We think that they have insufficient faith in the population at large. And as I say, our professional audience research confirms this, that when people are given the truth in a context where they can look at it with other people and then be offered ways that they can really meaningfully, collectively do stuff about it, they welcome that. And that's what we do in the Climate Majority Project. And that's also what my books are, of course, about. I'm encouraged, by the positive take-up that these things are having. I think we're on the edge. I think that we're at the beginning of a huge wave here. I think that what we saw with Fridays for Future, for example, and the many millions of young people who demonstrated there across the world, absolutely inspiringly, I think that was only the beginning. I think we're going to see far larger mobilizations. And some of these are going to involve people who are not activists at all. And they're going to be all age groups. And I think it's actually enormously exciting.
There is something liberating, isn't there, about honesty. I did an episode about pluralistic ignorance last year.
Yeah.
Year before? Can't remember. Talking to the wonderful Deborah Prentice about this. And I use an example in that, the sort of thing we can all find in our own lives, where you've been having a bit of a sort of disagreement or a weird situation with someone, and someone then just calls it out. Someone in the relationship says, you know what? This situation is X. And the naming of something like that you can feel it acting as a kind of liberation where you go, yeah, all right, you're right, it is X, and I feel shit about it, and you feel shit about it, and you have a cuddle, and you move on. And it sounds like you see, perhaps more than anything else, like honesty as part of a liberation that allows us to do something about something, be that climate or something else, right?
That is absolutely it, Dave. You've completely got it there. And for us in the Climate Majority Project, this concept of pluralistic ignorance is very important. And we exist to break that cycle of mutual ignorance. We think that there is a majority already out there who are concerned, and that's what the polls show. And we think that that majority is ready to hear more truth and ready to be mobilized. And that one of the things which is keeping them back is they don't necessarily realize just how many other people are in the exact same position as them. And that has also been our own experience on a smaller scale over and over again during this process. So for me, this started in the think tank I founded, Greenhouse, several years ago now. When was it? It was about 8 years ago now. We had a session where we decided to look together. This is the people inside the think tank at what we thought was coming on climate and what we felt about it. And basically, I wrote about this in "Do You Want to Know the Truth?" Basically, what we all said, one after another, was, "I think the situation is worse than what everyone's saying. I'm really afraid about it, and I think I'm the only person who feels this way." Right? And of course, by the time we'd all gone round and said that, two things had happened. Firstly, our fear that the situation was worse than most people had realized had been sort of confirmed, because we found, oh gosh, lots of other people feel that way. So that kind of made it worse. But the thing which made it better, of course, was that we all realized that we were all in the same boat. And then you can start to do something together. And that's what we did. And that's the kind of process that in the Climate Majority Project we're aiming to scale up. And we've already started. And lots of other people are doing the same kind of thing. This is part of what happened when I started talking about the need for a new moderate flank to follow up on the consciousness-raising success of the likes of Extinction Rebellion. What I noticed was it's happening, that people in all sorts of diverse areas, whether in community climate action or senior corporate lawyers or insurance executives or people in novel forms of mass mobilizing campaigning organizations, well, all of these people, many of them not activists at all, are manifesting is this kind of consciousness. They're putting it to work in their professional lives, in their neighborhoods, in their churches. And what we need is for people to notice this and to recognize each other and to recognize, oh my goodness, I'm part of this huge emerging wave. And there is, as I said earlier, an enormous sense of hope that can go with that.
Yeah, I've always said, no, I haven't always said at all. I make myself sound like I'm wiser than I am. I have sometimes said, people say, what can I, yes, all right, look, I understand climate change is bad. What can I do about it? And the first thing I've always said to people, sometimes said, is talk to someone else about that.
Absolutely.
Right? And it sounds kind of flimsy. It sounds like you're not smashing enough things. But it seems like quite an important first thing, not least because you're saying it out loud and, you know, kind of taking ownership of it, but also, like you say, well, the person you're talking to also feels shit about it, then that's two of you feel shit together. And that feels quite powerful, right?
Totally. And this is something, again, that we say and that is increasingly widely recognized, I think. Alex Evans from Larger Us and various other people are doing really good work in this area. And I think this is going to be a growing coming wave of people being willing to talk about what has still, until very recently, been a somewhat taboo subject. And when people do talk about it, almost invariably, although there can be some pain in the process, you feel better by the end of it.
All of this is making me think about trust and about who we trust. And I want to ask you how important that is in practicing honesty about climate change, or about, you know, anything, but let's talk about climate. If I talk to someone who I don't know, who thinks I'm a silly greenie, who is inclined to think everything I come out with is claptrap, and I honestly tell them my truth, is that helpful? Or is it better that they hear that from someone else? I guess what I'm getting at is, and it's coming back to what I said at the start, is sometimes being honest not really going to help, because you might just rub someone up the wrong way and make things worse than you started.
Well, it's worth thinking about this concept of trusted messengers, right? Who do people trust? And of course, the answer is different people trust different people, right? Some people trust often people who are similar to them, although not always. There are also quite a lot of contexts in which people trust people who are different from them, people, for example, with expertise. And in fact, in some important issues, when transformative change is needed, this is brilliantly explored in Damon Centola's book on change. What you actually need in order to get transformative change is for people to see that a wide variety of different people, including people who are different from themselves, are believing in something or trusting in something or doing something about something. But quite often it will start with people who you have strong ties with and people who are similar to you. So if I'm talking with someone who's very different from me, it may well be that me being brutally honest with them about how bad the climate situation is will just sort of bounce off. Whereas if their next door neighbor does it, or if their daughter does it, or if their priest does it, or if the manager of their local football club does it, then they may be more inclined to listen. So that's important. Context is important. Audience is important. Relationship is important. The bigger picture here is that trust is really important, and we have a bit of a crisis of trust in our culture. This is one of the reasons for the flourishing of the tragic phenomenon of climate denial, which is much more marginal than it was, but is still bigger than it should be. And this is what Daniel Schmachtenberger talks about when he talks about the war on sense-making and the systemic difficulty in knowing who to trust in our society today. But there is quite a lot of good old-fashioned stuff that we should trust. So, for example, by and large, scientists are extremely trustworthy. Now, that doesn't mean that they will have the answers to everything. People come to climate scientists for advice on how to run a successful climate movement. Well, they probably don't know anything about that. But what they do know about, you can trust them on it. And now here we come to what I think is the really crucial point, Dave, because this involves us all. What we need is we need to hear, all of us need to hear from people that we trust the truth, ideas about how to handle the truth, and ideas about what to do on the basis of those difficult truths. So if someone is in a position of having privileged information, as scientists often do, also civil servants, political leaders, insurers, military intelligence, there's got a whole load of people who know stuff, which is important, and some of it is obviously of climate or eco relevance. Those people need to make sure that they are disclosing and not keeping stuff back, and that they are not thinking the ordinary people can't handle this, so we're going to keep it back. No. what we are increasingly hearing and seeing is people want to know, they want to be prepared, they want to get into a position of being able to do something about it. And where it also then comes to affect us all is that we all, I believe, have a responsibility to disclose emotionally. What I mean by that is, if we are struggling with the reality, if we are struggling to face our fears about how bad the future could be, we need to share that. We need to share that with our families. We need to share that with those we work with, whoever it is that we can potentially influence and be a part of something together. That is one of the key ways, having those kind of conversations you mentioned earlier, that is one of the key ways in which we're really going to make progress on climate. If people are willing to come clean about their fears and about their hopes. Remember what I said a long time ago about, sometimes we think that honesty is all about coming clean about bad stuff, but it's also about coming clean about good stuff. Right? What do you dream of? What does your heart yearn for? What do you want to bring into this world? What do you passionately believe could be possible if you and a bunch of other people really try to make it possible? These are the kinds of things we also need to allow ourselves to think. So it's about being willing to trust those who deserve trust. It's about being willing to disclose ourselves to whoever we need to disclose to, whether that be loved ones, colleagues, etc. And it's about all of that feeding into the process of us being our bigger selves. And ultimately what that means is it's about trusting ourselves.
Rupert, thank you so much for coming on Your Brain on Climate. Now, you've mentioned it a few times. Tell us more about this Climate Majority project quickly, and then just other stuff. You've got a book out and how people can keep in touch with you and all that.
So the Climate Majority project is launching right now, and this really is what my life's work has built up to, and it's a big project involving many people now already. What we're trying to do is nothing less than to enable the climate-concerned majority to become aware of itself and to deepen and to become activated. And as I say, it goes way beyond activism. It's about finding and showing and joining up ways in which people can become meaningfully active on this, wherever they have power or potential voice in their lives. And do come and look us up at climatemajorityproject.com. And in terms of my books that we've touched on in this podcast, well, the most relevant one of all is my most recent book, Do You Want to Know the Truth? The Surprising Rewards of Climate Honesty, which, as the title suggests, is really exactly about what we've been talking about in this podcast here. And it goes into much greater detail on the need to build this broad new moderate flank, on the concept of emergency and its downsides as well as its upsides, on the importance of the 1.5 limit and on the consequences of its being breached, which is what we're about to see, and on how we can unleash the horror of that moment if we're prepared to be honest about it, to start the kind of transformative change that we so desperately need.
Rupert, thank you so much. And I must say, I have ended this conversation resolutely unbummed. So for that, if nothing else, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I meant it. I'm unbummed. I am properly unbummed. Thank you very much, Rupert. And I think he's right. If I think about all the things in my life that seem like these big elephants in the corner of the room. I don't want to look at them and I don't want to talk about them, but I know they're there and they make me anxious because everyone's scared of an elephant. First thing you got to do is say that's an elephant. So yeah, thank you. Do check out Rupert's stuff. Check out his work. Fascinating guy. Also, I did an episode of my other now deceased podcast called Sustainababble. If you search Sustainababble Rupert Read, you'll find more of a sort of comedic chat with Rupert about his previous book, which is a bit more about the reasons that everything is buggered. But it's really good to listen to, so go and have a search for that. Please do get in touch with me. Tell me what you thought of the show. hello@yourbrainonclimate.com or on the Twitter @brainclimate. And please leave a review if you like what you've heard. Go to iTunes or wherever else you can leave reviews. It makes such a massive difference for little podcasts. It really, really does. Buddy Ronan Keating and all those people, they don't need your reviews. I need your reviews. That is what gets people listening to this stuff. It's what gets other people hearing this stuff. Please take a minute out of your day and go and do that. Please. Thank you. Please. And, of course, chuck me a couple of quid on the Patreon at www.patreon.com/yourbrainonclimate. Wonderful. I will be back next month. Look after yourselves and keep it real. Thanks for listening, and I will speak to you very soon. Okay, bye.